I've never considered myself an unlucky person. I've always just assumed that bad stuff happens to everyone, right? Well, I've had quite the string of bad luck lately that has me questioning that. I moved out of home at a young age at 18 after having a rocky relationship with my parents. I was told at the time that it was a reasonable age to be moving out and on with my life, but in hindsight, knowing that is no longer as common as it used to be, I see now that it was a little ambitious for someone fresh out of high school to start paying rent while working a part time job and also trying to figure out life at the same time. I found myself bouncing around from one job to the next, sometimes holding down two or three at a time, none of which paid very well and all expected a full availability. You know how it is. Usually I would end up overcommitting to one job and then I would lose another. I hit a point where I was working myself to death and still somehow not managing to pay my rent month after month, and I decided, screw this. I don't want to live my life in debt to this boss or to that landlord. I want to live life on my terms. So I took a leap of faith, quit my jobs, and moved out of my one-bedroom apartment into, well, nowhere. I say leap of faith because I was seriously putting a lot of faith in myself and my ability to survive out in the world. I considered myself street savvy enough and had a pretty good understanding of how the world worked, well enough to live in survival mode at least. Lots of people live through backpacking trips all the time, right? So I figured I'd do just that. And that worked out for a time. I picked up odd jobs here and there, just enough to feed myself and go on another day. It was hard at first, but once I got into a rhythm, I actually didn't mind it. No matter how hard life got, I always had the freedom to up and leave if I wanted to. And I did cherish that feeling. You'd think sleeping outdoors every day would be hard, but I found a pretty nice wooded area in a secluded part of town that didn't get much foot or vehicle traffic, and I anchored down there. You know, like a home base. It was a small group of trees surrounded by bushes with a little opening in the middle. I liked the fact that I could go to the center of this area, lean against a tree, and be invisible to the world. I even started feeling comfortable enough to start storing some things there. Where I live, the climate is never too extreme at night, so I considered myself fortunate. I had a few people I knew I could hit up for a job here and there and didn't really mind hiring me for short-term contract type work. I really felt like I was carving a place for myself in the world. The biggest downside, though, is that I feel like I've lost part of myself. I used to have much bigger and grander plans for my life, and now I've just become well accustomed to settling for whatever my situation is. Every time I've put a serious effort into anything, it's blown up in my face in one way or another. So yeah, I am fine by living on my terms now. I might not be reaching for the stars, but I am surviving, and that's all I can ask for. One cool fall night, I had just returned to my sleeping grounds after a full day of helping an old man demolish his garage, when I saw my usual safe haven was trashed. It was pretty dark at this time of day, so all the light now currently came from a distant street light and the ends of some cigarettes I could see inside of laughing mouths. What little I had was destroyed and thrown around all over the place, hanging from trees or in pieces on the ground. A group of shady-looking men were stomping around and seeming to be having a great time destroying my place of refuge. I thought about going in and fighting them off to retrieve my stuff, but I don't think that would have ended well for me. There were about 5 of them up against one very tired me. I figured my best option would be to slowly back away and hope they didn't notice me, hide out behind a nearby bus shelter, and come back for my stuff after they left. Ironically enough, as I thought this, they noticed me. "What the hell you looking at, kid?" one of the bigger men shouted as if I offended him by just walking in on him destroying my own stuff. That's my stuff. What are you doing to my stuff?" I sputtered out in response. "You mean this garbage?" he said as he stepped forward, holding a box of some items I had decided were worth keeping after I moved on into the backpack life. It wasn't a lot, but still some things that I had deemed important and wanted to hold on to. He turned the box upside down, dumped it onto the ground, and proceeded to crush every object with his heel. "Hey!" I took a step forward. Another pair of men got up from eating my stash of collected food variables and moved in towards me. The smaller one of the two pointed at me and said, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." As they got closer to me, I got a better look at their faces. They both had this wild look in their eyes. Their faces were sweating as if they had just run a marathon. The next thing I noticed was how jerky their movements were. These guys were definitely on something, and I wasn't planning on sticking around to see what. I convinced myself that no matter how precious some of these things were to me, they weren't worth losing my life over to some cracked out psychopaths. At that moment, I turned and ran. I didn't know where, just the opposite of here. I heard some commotion behind me, and as I looked over my shoulder, I noticed that this big guy stopped making my things one with the earth and started to chase after me. The way he ran was terrifying. Head down, pumping his arms, and just putting his all into catching up to me. This guy looked like the offspring between a missile and a linebacker. I turned back forward and began running even harder. I was never an all-star athlete back in high school or anything, but I was always pretty good at running. Despite that, my heart was pounding. My vision was blurry all around the edges, and I had to work really hard just to keep my focus on getting the hell out of here without tripping over anything. I could hear the gorilla-like man huffing away as he tried to make ground. But to my luck, his method of reckless speed sent him flying over a garbage can that was chained to the ground. The man crashed into the dirt at full force, putting him completely out of commission in the chase. As I got away, I could hear his buddies in the back laughing at him for apparently trying to hurdle the garbage can. The last thing I heard as I turned the corner down a nearby alley was, "Don't come back! We own this park now!" Don't worry, I thought. You didn't have to tell me twice. That takes you to where I am now, sitting on the edge of a walking platform in a train yard that was closed down for the night. As I was creating as much distance between myself and that park as possible, I was thinking, to hell with this town. I needed a fresh start. I knew I couldn't go back home to my parents because, trust me, that bridge was burned. I decided I'd wait it out here at night and hitch a ride on the first train out in the morning. I didn't really care which one or where it was going. Something in me just really craved a new beginning. I walked through the coarse rocks and gravel, carefully navigating my footing on the railway track, which was no easy task to do in the dark. After all, I wanted to ride a train, not to get hit by one. I climbed into an open box car of the last train in the row. I sat down and leaned against the cold steel wall. I got as comfortable as I could and settled in for the long night ahead of me. As it turns out, I would not have to wait long as I began to nod off almost immediately. I guess all the action tonight really took a toll on me. I was jolted awake by the sudden acceleration of the train I was in. There wasn't much light coming in from outside. I figured it must be quite early in the morning. It was a cloudy, gray day outside. Some light was shining through a few cracks in the sky, but otherwise it was hard to tell what time it was out there. On gray, cloudy days, morning, afternoon, and evening all kind of look the same, don't they? Part of me started to get a little excited. Maybe there was a small part of me that was glad things played out the way they did. Maybe my soul was craving an adventure, a break from the bleak reality I'd been living in the past year. I moved closer to the doorway and watched the environment around me transform as the train picked up speed, leaving the train yard. All of the other trains were still there. The lights were off in the station. Actually, I didn't even see people walking around or waiting for the next train. Maybe I just happened to be on the first train out that day, or maybe it was just a cargo train and didn't have any passengers in it. A warm breeze was blowing around me as I leaned back against the wall and peered out at the view. I know on a cloudy day when there's a warm breeze, it usually means that a storm is coming, but I didn't mind it. I was pretty well protected in this car, and I was on my way. We finally broke through the edge of the city, and I watched the landscape change from dusty old buildings to grass, trees, and hills. I didn't spend much time outside of the city, really, so it was refreshing to have a change of scenery like this. The air smelled clean and fresh, although humid and damp. A low rumble of thunder crawled across the sky. It was a deep, threatening sound that shook the train car I was in. It was as if the sky was warning the train not to go any further. A few seconds of silence passed when another rumble began. I poked my head out of the doorway and noticed the wind had really picked up. The grass in the fields was being blown all around, and some dirt was being picked up and tossed into the air. A small part of my survival instinct must have kicked in because I felt a deep sense of dread at that moment. Maybe a primal part of me knew to take shelter from whatever was going to happen. A multitude of hills passed us by as the train made its way into a grassy valley up ahead. At this point, enough time had passed that there were no more buildings in sight, no roads, no people, just the hard steel rail of the train piercing its way through the landscape. Then the wind picked up again, even more so than before. It got to a point where I really had to be careful not to move around too much in the car, for fear of losing my balance or getting blown out of the doorway. I positioned myself into the back corner of the car so I could still see outside, but a couple walls next to me that I could brace up against. I noticed something was forming outside in the sky up above in the valley. It looked like the clouds were melting down into a big gray drop that was making its way to the ground. Then I realized what I was seeing. I'd never seen a tornado before, but I've seen enough movies and pictures to put together that that's what was happening here. A tornado was forming and the train was heading straight towards it. A bright flash appeared ahead of us that blinded me for a second as red lightning struck the ground where the tornado was forming. Then again, and again. The thunder was no longer a low, deep rumble. It was a loud crack that threatened to split the sky into pieces. The other thunder didn't scare me so far, but that one did. I was in a bit of a state of shock seeing the tornado forming in front of me, but that thunder crack snapped me back into reality. I was about to be driven head-on into a very angry-looking tornado that was growing nastier by the second. More red lightning flashes began appearing inside the tornado, faster and faster to the point where one was happening about every second. I considered jumping and rolling out of the train and running in the other direction, but then I thought, really, what are my chances of outrunning a tornado that's already so close to me? Plus, the train was already going so fast, I really didn't think that I'd hit the ground and get up unscathed from it. I decided my best chance was to hunker down and hope this train tanks through the thing. Trains were built for this kind of thing, right? I've seen tornadoes lift up cars and buildings like they were children's toys before, but hopefully this train goes right past it without actually making contact with it. A few moments later, I knew that this wouldn't be the case. The windy beast had made its way to the tracks, and the train was set for collision. I held on tightly to some ledges in the walls, tucked my head in between my knees, and got ready for the inevitable. It's hard to describe what happened next. It was like sensory overload. All I could feel was wind, no longer warm, but icy cold. It didn't flow around me, but raged in and out of the car doors like a blindfolded bull trying to find its way out of a cage. When I opened my eyes, all I could see were flashes from the lightning. I couldn't leave my eyes open for longer than a second because the flashes all started to blend together into this red and white blinding light that just kept getting brighter and brighter. Then the strangest, most disturbing part happened. A sense of weightlessness. A groaning and shrieking of metal reluctantly being hoisted off the ground. Was it possible? Could a tornado really lift a full-size train off the tracks? A million thoughts raced through my head as if we were suspended in the air for what felt like an eternity. But in reality, it couldn't have been more than a few seconds. There was one more loud bang of thunder, and then the train was suddenly dropped back to the ground. Like whatever force of nature was holding the train in the air suddenly just let go. As the car smashed back down on the tracks, I felt my head hit the back of the wall from whiplash on the landing. And then, nothing. Who knows how much time had passed between the storm and when I eventually opened my eyes. As I recalled what had just happened, I was surprised to not be dealing with a pounding headache from the impact. I felt the back of my head expecting to feel a gash or some blood, but I was fine. Looking out the window, the scenery looked very much the same as it did before the storm. Nothing but green fields and hills all around us. I began to wonder if I had just fallen asleep and imagined the whole thing happening in a dream. But that couldn't have happened, right? It was all just too real. As I pondered this, I noticed something up ahead was approaching the train in the distance. As we got closer, it appeared to be a large forest. And I mean large. It reached from edge to edge of the horizon, and it looked quite dense. I poked my head out of the window to see directly ahead of us. Yep, the tracks were going straight in. The train rolled on and began to enter the forest. Then my sight of clear fields was replaced by thick tree trunks, an endless mess of them. I would have thought that this was a normal forest until I realized I couldn't see the tops of the trees. This forest must be massive. Oh well, nothing to do now but sit back and see where this train takes me. The air smelled nice, so thick and full of life. I've spent so long in the city that I forgot how sensational being in nature can be. I feel the breeze in my hair, the smell of leaves, the sound of, well, the train is about all I can hear actually. My trance-like state of enjoying the outdoors was disrupted by a loud crack in the distance. My immediate thought was that the storm had caught up to us, but after looking back out the window behind us, I could see no angry skies, just towering behemoths of trees looming over a narrow passageway the tracks made their way through. Who made these tracks, and when? It must have been an eternity in this forest. How did they clear all these trees? This was the first time I began to feel like something about this train route was different. Not that I have a ton of experiences with train rides, but something about this forest seemed just off. Like for one, I haven't seen any wildlife of any kind. And I know the train is loud, but I expected to hear some birds or bug life or really anything by now. The forest seemed to be abandoned of all life except the plants that surrounded us. Then another loud crack, followed by a big thud in the distance. This time I was able to notice a cloud of dust and dirt poof up from the ground. My best guess was that a tree had fallen, but what on earth could have knocked over a tree of this size? I guess it would have had to probably have been a dead tree, right, that finally fell over? It was after what I saw next that made my skin grow cold and my heart fall into my stomach. It looked like a large figure of some kind was moving around behind the trees. It was hard to tell as it was kind of silhouetted from the shadows all around it, but I definitely saw something moving, and it was big. Definitely bigger than a bear, even on its back feet. A calm grew over me as I realized the speed of this train was going. Whatever it was, it must be long gone behind us by now. Before I could relax fully, though, I saw something else. Another figure. Was it the same one? Did it catch up to the train already? Or was it something else? Before I had my answer, I was interrupted by the loud screeching of the train's brakes. I looked out the window to see what was going on. Darn, the train was too long for me to get a clear view. But this wasn't a slowing down to a stop. This was an emergency stop the train as soon as possible kind of braking. As soon as the train began braking, it suddenly came to a rough, jarring halt. The force launched me forward to the front of the train car I was in. Fortunately, it wasn't too far and I was able to catch myself before busting through the door ahead of me. Even though the train had stopped, I didn't dare get out. And even though I was a little unsettled about this trip so far, whatever I saw in those woods was far less appealing than sticking it out on this weird-ass train ride. That's when I got a clear view of it. The first thing I noticed was just how tall it was. A thin, gigantic figure, at least 3 stories high. It had long, lanky limbs and a sickly grayish color to its skin. I couldn't make out the face, but noise was definitely coming from it. A sort of loud, low-pitched groan, like the noise a barge would make on its departure. Then it did something I never imagined another living being could do to a train. The freakish, lumbering creature slowly bent down, wrapped its hand with unsettlingly long fingers around the cab that was in front of me, and began to pull it upwards. The sound of wood crunching and metal bending was deafening as I watched this train cab get ripped into the air. I was afraid that my train car would get pulled with it, but it didn't. It just dropped back to the ground. The monstrous gray creature turned and began to walk off into the woods with its new prize. A lump in my throat formed as I heard ear-piercing screams from men and women alike inside the train car being carried off to what I imagined would be its certain doom. I didn't even have time to process what had happened before the sound of screams was replaced by the sound of the train whistle blowing strongly. A horrifying moment of clarity washed over me. My train car was no longer attached to the train. I considered the impossible task of attaching the train car to the one in front of me. I wasn't a weak man by any means, but I didn't have the Herculean strength to pull my cab up to the one in front. I had to risk being caught by whatever that thing was and climb out onto the tracks and get into the next car. Yes, I had to stay on this train and get out of these woods. Being caught and busted by one of the staff beat the hell out of being caught in these woods alone. While considering my options, the train ahead of me started puffing and rolling forward. I got to my feet and dashed out the door. In a moment of sheer adrenaline, I carefully navigated running down the train tracks and just managed to grab the railing onto the cab ahead of me. The train picked up speed rapidly as I climbed aboard. While I was happy to be on the train, I didn't want to hang out outside the cab and risk being grabbed by one of those things. I moved to the door, grabbed the handle, and slowly opened it. The door opened and I looked inside. Wait, what? I thought. Nobody was in this car. What the hell? The train car that got carried off sounded full of people. But maybe everyone had moved into the train cars ahead to get some distance from the chaos. Oh well, whatever the case, I'm grateful I managed to survive that, and now I get to hide out in this next car scot-free. Hopefully we get out of these woods and into another town soon. I want off this crazy ride. About an hour had passed of nothing but trees flying by in the windows. Fortunately, we didn't have any more disturbances from those things, and we managed to travel through the woods without issue. I started to see more and more spacing between the trees as I realized we were starting to exit the woods. Trees continued to thin out until there was nothing left but fields. For a moment, I thought we were back in reality, like the nightmare I just lived through was over. I poked my head out the window to see what was ahead. In the distance, I could see large peaks. Mountains. There aren't any mountains even remotely close to where I was living. But then again, who knows where I am now? The train chugged along for a good while before the mountains grew from tiny points to colossal giants. It's weird, I haven't seen anything man-made in a good while. No roads, buildings, or even signs along the tracks. After peeking out of the window again, I noticed something odd. It appeared as though we were headed straight into a mountain. If there was a tunnel, it was too small to see from a distance. Just then, the train must have collided because it felt like the cabs were starting to shake. But the cabs didn't collapse or topple over like you'd expect. In fact, we just kept moving forward. I was braced for some kind of further impact as the train was swallowed into the mountain more and more. Despite the shaking and all the disruption, the train managed to make its way through. Finally, it was time for my cab to pass. Then, darkness. The train was definitely in some kind of tunnel, but impossibly small. It must be just big enough for a train to fit in. However, I use the term fit loosely. The train continued to shake and grind through the dark passageway. The only illumination came from sparks that would fly off of the walls of the train as it brushed into the rocky terrain around it. Hopefully this tunnel ends soon before the train falls apart. Ah! I jolted up as I felt something weird at my feet. They were wet. I looked down and noticed water on the floor of the cabin. What the hell? Where did this come from? After staring for a moment, I began to notice something odd. The water was rising? How is this possible? I would look out the window, but there's still nothing but blackness and the odd spark. I really was puzzled at this point. What do I do here? Is there anything I really can do? Water began to fill more rapidly and was nearing my ankles at this point. I have to get out of here. To hell with hiding out in this empty cabin. I need answers, and I need them now. I sloshed my way through the now shin-high water to the door and opened it. To my dismay, it wasn't just my cabin. The whole train was plowing through water that had already passed the wheels. The train was being submerged. No time to think. I have to keep moving. I jumped forward to the cabin ahead of me and pushed open the door. What? This cabin is also empty. Where are the passengers or the crew? Oh well, keep moving. I moved to the cab ahead and pushed the door open. Empty. Panic began to set in, as I had not met another soul on this train and it was rapidly filling with water. I began to run through the now almost waist-high water to the next cabin. When I tried to open the door, it provided even more resistance as I was pushing against it with a significant amount of water on either side. Finally, into the next cabin. Empty. I keep moving. Someone was at least driving this train, right? Open the next door. Empty. Just as I was about to accept the fact that I was alone on this death trap, I pushed open the next door with all of my might, and water rushed in with me as I fell forward into the next cabin. It was dry. "Close the door!" a voice yelled out in the darkness. I then realized if I didn't close the door behind me, this cabin would share the same fate as the others. I jumped to my feet and forcibly shoved the door closed. I turned around and there he was, the man who finally broke the emptiness I found myself in up till now. "Who are you? What is this train? Where are we going?" I yelled. A light flared up in front of me as the man turned on his electric-powered lantern. It illuminated the cabin just enough to make out his appearance. He wore a uniform that must have been with the train company who was responsible for this mess. The man was fairly old in age. Not quite elderly, but past his middle-aged years. He was well-kept and professional-looking, despite the circumstances we found ourselves in. "Relax, traveler. I know this sounds odd, but these events are to be expected. Do you have a ticket for me to punch?" The man reached out his hand. I stared back at it with a gaping mouth. Did he really expect me to pay for this experience? After an awkward pause that lingered a few seconds longer than I would have liked, he chuckled. "Don't worry, I'm only kidding. There are no tickets for this train." I stared at him silently, still unsure of what to say. He smirked. "Besides, I think you got your ticket punched the moment you got on board." "What do you mean by that?" "Never mind. You asked who I was? I'm the conductor of this fine locomotive. Have been for as long as I can remember." He was oddly calm considering the train was completely underwater. The sparks outside the windows had been replaced with bubbles. "What about the engineer? I need to talk to him. I need answers." "No can do." The man scratched his chin. "It's impossible." "What do you mean?" "Well, I'd take you to him, but his quarters are always locked. I've never even been in the engine room. Hell, I've never even met the man." "You've never met... How is that possible?" "How is any of this possible?" As he said that, the darkness outside the windows was replaced with a faint blue glow. The longer we went on, the brighter it got. The train seemed to stabilize from the shaking it was undergoing as we went through the tunnel. It seems like it almost brute forced its way through, and now we were out. I walked away from the conductor and peered out the window. Somehow, it looked like we were in the bottom of the ocean. I don't know how to explain it. Giant underwater landscapes surround us as far as I could see. Huge underwater plants swayed in various colliding currents. There was giant glowing sea life that I did not recognize, swirling around the giant oceanic structures in mesmerizing patterns. And one thing I'll probably never forget is the silhouette of a giant, and I mean massive, creature slowly swimming along in the distance. If that thing came this way, it would probably derail us, or eat us, without even realizing it. I couldn't believe the size of it. I turned back to the conductor. How is this possible? What do you mean, boy? We're a train in the water. What don't you get? He looked at me, confused. I mean, who laid the tracks? How are we not being crushed from the pressure of even being here? Haven't you noticed yet? This isn't an ordinary train. We aren't on an ordinary journey. The conductor looked out the window thoughtfully. It was getting a little infuriating the way that he answered my questions. He was blunt and clear with his answers, but they always seemed to leave me more confused. A loud, what can only be described as a whale call mixed with the sound of an airplane boomed through the cabin. The environment around us rumbled from the sea creature's moaning and then returned to calmness. The man chuckled. Whoa, that was a big one. What was that thing? I pointed at the large creature I noticed earlier out the window, who now decided to make his presence known. Oh, that? No, not that thing. It's just a pup. Its mother should be around here somewhere. Hopefully not before we leave this stretch of track. My stomach sank, a feeling I was getting all too comfortable with at this point. If that blimp-sized monstrosity was only the child version, I did not want to see the full-grown version. I've never felt so small in my life. Speaking of this stretch of track, how much longer until we're at the surface? I asked the conductor. Not much longer. This is a shorter drag of the journey. We'll be out of the water soon. But we aren't going back up to the surface. We have to go down further first. The train pushed on through the water with surprising ease. I noticed, however, that we were on a decline, not an incline on the way out of here, as I was expecting. I guess this is a only way out is through situation. Something else I noticed was the temperature climbing in the cabin. It was mild at first, but then I really started to notice myself starting to sweat. Needless to say, I don't think temperature regulation is the top priority on this train. May as well ask the one guy I can. Hey, any idea why it's getting so hot in here? Look out your window. I take a good look out the window and notice something interesting. Big orange pits scattered around. Are those? Yep, volcanic craters. Gets a little hot when passing by. You best brace yourself because it's about to get a whole lot hotter. Up ahead I notice we're about to enter another tunnel. But there was something different about this one. The biggest thing being the large amounts of magma flowing down from each side. After looking more closely, I could not believe my eyes. We were entering a volcano. What kind of madman engineer would drive us directly into a volcano? I'd ask, but I know I'd probably get a vague, or oddly direct answer at best. I decided to wait it out and hope for the best. Unlike the last tunnel, this one was not long at all. After what felt like a short, very hot burst, we emerged on the other side. I squinted my eyes at the light difference here. It was bright and hot. A dark, deep red flooded the inside of the cabin. As I looked towards the conductor, I noticed something odd. That he was gone. I was alone. It's crazy how different it can feel going from two people to one in such a small space. Wait, what was that sound outside? It sounded like a collection of heaving, whimpering, crying. I look out the window. I jump back as a pair of hands smack onto the glass. I stumble back but catch myself. What the hell? Then more hands. The best way I could describe it was clamoring, as if they belonged to people who desperately needed, onto this train. More and more hands appeared, scraping and sliding up and down the windows. Some tried to punch the glass. Others tried to grab on before the train sped by. I'm not going to lie. I was sweating for reasons other than heat at this point. I dared get closer to the window and look down at these people. Terror filled my mind as I looked at the reality of the bodies that were attached to the hands. These people were barely people. Their eyes were burned out of their sockets. It appeared their entire bodies had severe third-degree burns. Their clothes were ragged and barely hanging onto them. What very little hair left on them fell out as they clambered around, pushing and shoving at each other to try to get onto the train. These poor people, their skin was full of gashes and boils. Who knows how long they'd been suffering down here like this? And then I had a crazy thought. Should I let them in? The thought quickly passed as I considered the danger that it would put me and the train in. There are hundreds of people out there, and this cab could hold what, maybe 20? And who knows how they'll treat me once they're inside? How do I know they won't freaking cannibalize me? As I pondered my options, a solution presented itself, but not in a way I liked. A bunch of tall, nimble, warrior-looking men with dark reddish-brown skin crawled over a ledge that was just beyond the crowd. Their skin clung tightly to their bones, tough and leathery. But at the same time, it looked as though the skin was having a hard time keeping the bones in. Some stuck through the skin, a shoulder blade here, a few ribs there. Their faces full of rage and anger. Needless to say, I was terrified. They all carried long spears that looked to be made of bones from animal carcasses that were definitely not from Earth. Large, jagged teeth bound together made up the tips of the spears. And before the crowd of misfortunate souls knew what hit them, these men started plunging their spears into their backs. With a freakish strength I'd never seen before, these warriors lifted their speared bodies into the air and quickly carried them off over the ledge. The frantic people seemed to know what was happening, as they kicked and screamed while being carried off and away. Some of the crowd scattered, trying to escape the warriors, while others tried even harder to get onto the train. A few managed to get lucky and climb above onto the roof. Their luck shortly ran out, as what I could describe only to be imps with pelican-like heads swooped down from the sky and scooped them into their giant drooling mouths, flying away after. I fell to the ground. I was beside myself. Is this hell? Is this really where I am? Is this the destination that we've been traveling to this whole time? I resisted looking out the window as the carnage was too hard to stomach. The train kept moving along and the commotion seemed to be behind us now. The train entered another tunnel. We were inside a large castle-like structure made up of dark purple bricks that looked as old as time. Somehow, the bricks vibrated and shook as though they wanted to be apart, but some otherworldly force was keeping them together. The tunnel opened up into a large room, bigger than my brain could comprehend. Thousands upon thousands of rows of cells lined the walls, but they weren't orderly like a prison the way that I was used to seeing. They were randomly scattered together, like a beehive, clustered together in strange patterns, some larger than others. But inside each of them was one to a handful of people, and the sound of this giant chamber was deafening. All I could hear was the sound of screaming and sheer terror. The people in the cells being tortured beyond what I thought possible. The sound of skin being pulled off with piping hot tools. Muscles being plucked off their bodies like a smorgasbord for depraved, greedy-looking black gremlins. And some of the people in their cells weren't just being physically tortured. One had a demon-like entity popping in and out of the walls randomly, just screaming at the captive who was cowering in the corner. Another was in a large cell by himself that was slowly getting smaller and smaller. There was a large lumbering creature covered in fur with a multitude of horns on its head, crawling along the walls. It would stop periodically to reach its long, hairy brown arms into cells and pull someone out, proceeding to eat them right there. I'm going to save you the details of what that looked like. I puked right there on the spot. It happened instantly, like my body couldn't handle what it was seeing any longer. The same questions popped into my head. Why am I here? Where are we going? Why me? I decided not to look out the window any longer. I couldn't take this anymore. I was sweating profusely and shaking. How long has it been? And how much longer? I sat down on one of the chairs in the train car, put my head down and closed my eyes. Fine, I'll just stay like this and wait this ride from hell out. Suddenly, I felt the hot air breathing onto me. I was struck with fear. I opened my eyes and saw a creature directly next to me. It was pitch black, as though its body went on forever. I couldn't exactly make out the details of it, but it was roughly my size and stood maybe a foot away from me. Its head had jagged black hair poking out in every direction. Its eyes were pure white, almost glowing with energy. And the worst part about it was its smile, unnaturally large and crooked. It just stood there, unmoving, breathing, heaving, panting, as though it was enjoying what it was seeing. But that damn smile and expression on its face looked as though it was daring me to do something, to move even an inch, to challenge it. The way it stared at me made me want to scream. The state, it was beyond menacing. It made me want to cry, to wail, to die. I didn't know what to do, so I stayed still, frozen in terror. There was no way I was instigating this thing. It scared the hell out of me. It began shaking, subtly at first, but increasing in intensity to a more violent, angry shaking. The longer I stood still and didn't move, the more it shook, convulsing. The eyes and the smile stayed the same, despite the fact that I could tell it was getting mad. I decided to continue being still. I was not playing its game. I was not going to engage. Something in me just said that that was a really bad idea. Suddenly, in an instant, it threw its head back and let out the most blood-curdling scream I'd ever heard. And then poof, it was gone. Just like that, I exhaled and slid back into my seat. This needs to be over. Things began to calm down a bit after the uninvited guest left. We rolled on through whatever hellscape this was for maybe another hour or so. At some point, I just got used to the sound of screams. The wails, the cries for help, the clambering onto the train like ants. I just sunk back into my seat, covered my face with my hands, and waited. Even if this was all a dream, I just plan on riding it out like this. I know it's weird to say, but I really miss the conductor. He was the only other remotely normal thing about this train, and at least he provided some companionship. He also better believe that I have more questions for him the next time I see him.
You.
I was shaken out of my trance and looked around. Did the conductor come back?
You.
No, there was no sign of anyone around. And this voice was different. It was deeper. It boomed in a way that made my bones shake. And after looking out the window, nothing appeared out of the ordinary, a term I now use lightly.
Why?
Okay, the first few words were addressing me. Maybe I should have responded, but this one I'm confused about. Why? Wasn't that my line?
Why?
Hello? I asked meekly. I embarrassed myself with my cowardice. I barely got the uhs and the ums out of my throat to reply. Who are you?
Why?
What do you mean, why? The train began to shake violently. I held on to my seat while the train threatened to shake apart. The lights flickered for a moment before returning to normalcy.
Why?
I responded. Why am I here? I don't know. I got on this train hoping it would take me somewhere better than this. I was obviously wrong. I have no idea where the hell I am or where I'm going. A silence proceeded. No train shaking, no response, just silence. I guess my answer was sufficient enough.
Choose.
This one also confused me. What was I supposed to choose? I thought for a moment and then responded again. If you mean for me to stay on the train or leave here, I'm gonna stay. Better in here than whatever is out there. I wasn't dumb. I didn't exactly like being on this train, but I wasn't about to risk it out there.
Choose.
Alright, I guess that wasn't the answer it was looking for. I thought for a moment. Choose.
Choose.
The voice raised from a booming command to a roaring yell. I don't know what you mean. I choose to stay on the train. I choose to stay alive.
Worthless.
Ouch. That one hurt. Although I didn't understand what I was being asked, I knew my last answer must still have been incorrect. Whatever was happening here, I didn't want this mysterious being to send the train off the rails in anger, so I better think more carefully. I am not worthless. Silence. I know that I'm worth something. I know I am. I'll prove it. Silence. If this train ever returns to my world, I'll start trying in life again. I know I can do better. I don't want to be a hopeless drifter forever. I want to build or create something that is meaningful. I want to have a home, a bed, a roof. I want to start a family and be a part of something bigger. Why am I spilling my guts out like this? It's like I couldn't stop. I was afraid of whoever I was talking to, sure, but it's like the floodgates opened on everything I've desired for my life. Feelings I had shut away. I accepted mediocrity for a long time, and I wanted that to change. I continued. Even if it means sacrificing, I'll do whatever it takes. I need this for myself. I know I can do better. I'm not worthless. Finally it responded. Not with words, but with laughter. Loud, cruel laughter. I don't understand why. I felt like I gave an honest enough answer. And I think I actually believed what I was saying too. After the thunderous laughter ended, I noticed the most peculiar thing. The environment outside, it was changing. It started snowing. Outside, in this red, fiery tundra, it was snowing. I even noticed the temperature starting to drop in the cabin. Of everything I've seen, a weather change shouldn't have shocked me. But given the circumstances, it did. I've never seen snow before. Before long, there was a full-blown blizzard happening outside the cabin. The reddish-orange environment outside had begun to slowly lighten to a bright white environment. Although with the blistering wind howling all around the train, it was hard to make sense of anything. Just that it was cold. By now my adventure had been nothing of a combination of shock and awe. I've seen some incredible things, Monumental trees, extreme depths, unimaginable hells. But here, it was just snow. And cold. So cold. I've never lived anywhere cold before. Well, not like this. A light jacket on worse days. I've never seen a blizzard before with my own eyes, unless you count Christmas movies from when I was a kid. While it was nice that I wasn't witnessing horrors beyond my comprehension anymore, I was beginning to get a little alarmed by my new circumstances. It was only getting colder and colder, and I was not dressed for this kind of temperature drop. Frost had fully filled the windows, and the lights in the cabin went out again. The lighting that remained barely illuminated the now dull blue cabin. What I could see, however, was something that I'd never seen before. My own breath. Huh. Weird. Some time passed and I began to experience a new sensation. Shivering. I don't know why my body was doing this. All I know is that I found it kind of annoying. But I shivered nonetheless. I pulled my limbs close to my body and receded back into my seat for warmth. I didn't dare move freely around the cabin at this point. The windows just looked like sheets of ice. I wondered how the conductor was doing. Was he warm where he was? I wonder if he was close by. Did he forget about me? Does he even care if I freeze here alone because I'm technically a stowaway? The questions in my head began to slow as I began to get tired. I don't understand in these circumstances how I was getting sleepy, but it was happening. I mean, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing. I could hear the wind howling outside the walls, and it was somewhat soothing to me at this point. Yeah, this sucks, but at least I'm in here. The train is still moving along and hopefully somewhere better than here. I miss my home city. My circumstances weren't great, but at least I always knew what was going on. And it was warmer than this. Oddly enough now, I wasn't feeling too cold anymore. Just comfortable. Maybe a nap wouldn't be so bad. I was feeling pretty exhausted from the journey so far. Maybe I'll just shut my eyes for a bit. What's the worst that could happen? I sleep through this crazy train? As I started to drift to sleep, it's like every alarm in my head started to go off. A red alert, blaring sirens kind of thing. Get up, get moving, don't sleep. I think my survival instincts kicked into overdrive. Something told me that what I was doing was critically wrong. I don't understand why, but I know I should probably listen to those instincts. Just then, I saw something. Through the glistening icy windows, something in the distance. An orange glow. That's so odd, I haven't seen anything outside for hours. But it looked nice. Warm. The train began to grind to a halt. I couldn't believe it. Why is it stopping now? Does it have to do with that orange light? Steam blew from the train as it came to a complete stop. I wasn't thinking about the cold anymore, just confusion and curiosity as to why we'd come to a halt. I knew one thing though, that orange light spelled hope for me. Maybe it was a town up ahead, with lights and warmth. Maybe it was a fire of some kind. Either way, I feel like I needed to be there. I got up out of my seat and made my way to the door. The door handle was freezing to touch, but I grabbed hold anyway. I had to really heave on the door since it was frozen shut, but eventually it gave way. The cold outside air quickly filled the cabin and blasted me in the face. I paused for a moment as I adjusted to my new environment. Maybe I should just wait here on the train. I hesitated. Really, I have no idea what's out there or if it will even help me. This train is my only lifeline to getting home. I knew it logistically didn't make any sense to leave it, but my gut was telling me to go. Leave. Warmth. Hot. Home. I stepped out of the train and crunched into the snow with my shoe. I looked off in the direction of the glow and started making my way there. The snowdrifts varied between shin and knee depth, enough to take a serious effort to trudge through, but not so deep that it was impossible. All I knew is that I had to go. I had to be at the glow. There was something about it, hypnotic even. I felt in a trance as I moved. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I marched on. I shielded my face from the wind with one hand as the other reached ahead of me so I could tell if anything was ahead. I was surrounded by white. Snow above, below, all around. Blowing, howling, relentlessly enveloping me. All I knew is that I had to keep moving forward. I looked back behind me. No sight of the train. Was I that far ahead, or was the storm just preventing me from seeing it? Maybe it moved on, and I just couldn't hear it. It didn't matter. I was committed. I moved forward. I guess this is how it feels to be a moth. How long did I walk? An hour? A full day? Time is lost on me. All I know is the effort I needed to keep moving forward. I stopped feeling the cold some time ago. I don't know if it is a good thing or a bad thing. I stopped noticing the outcomes of my effort. My breathing, heart rate, sweat, dry mouth, all insignificant. I entered an almost out-of-body experience as I walked through the white abyss all around me. All there was the orange glow. That's all that mattered to me now. I had no concept of time, feeling. I had no memories. I had no self. Just the orange light. I needed to be there. Worse than I've needed anything ever. For most of the journey, I couldn't really tell if I was getting closer or not. Just that it was ahead of me. The next time I looked up at the orange glow, something strange happened. The speed in which I was approaching it rapidly increased. I didn't think I was moving any faster. Not that I could feel my legs moving anymore. The roaring of the storm was soon replaced with the roaring of this orange glow approaching. It was a different kind of roar, like a force of nature was blasting through the storm. Loud mechanical screeching pierced my ears. I pressed on. I don't know if I was getting faster or if the glow was approaching me, but I knew that I would find out soon enough. Finally, the glow started to take shape. A large faint object was behind the glow, seemingly pushing it forward. Then I recognized the shape. It was the front of a train. My quest, fueled by curiosity, desperation, and desire, was reshaped into one of confusion and terror. I tried so hard to get to this orange glow, but it turns out it was heading towards me the whole time. And if I didn't get out of the way, it would soon be going through me. The train blasted past me without a moment's hesitation. That's weird, I thought. I didn't notice any railroad tracks in the snow. Surely I would have tripped over them at some point. As the front of the train went by me, I happened to notice a figure in the window who was presumably driving the train. The figure was eerily familiar. Wait, that's not possible. The train blasted by me as I dashed out of the way. Snow exploded all around me as I shielded myself and took another couple steps back.
Hello!
A voice boomed through the chaos.
Take my hand!
To my surprise, I could make out the shape of a man reaching his body outside of the train. He had one arm holding onto the train by the rail and the other outstretched towards me. Due to how fast the train was moving, I didn't have time to think or weigh out my options. This was going to take critical timing if I was going to make it work. I inched closer and closer to the train, cautiously making sure not to stumble through the snow. I reached my arm out, and sure enough, our hands locked together and I was yanked into the air. The man pulled me aboard the Iron Titan that was blasting through the storm like it was a light breeze on a summer day. I was quickly ushered into one of the train cabins and sat down into one of the seats. How familiar. I was handed a blanket and a hot cup of tea. Once I calmed down and my vision settled and focused, I looked at my rescuer. It was the conductor. The same man from before. From the last train. Or this train. I'm confused. I left the first train to seek out the same train heading towards me?
Welcome back, son,
the conductor said, a little more nonchalantly than I would have liked. How is this possible? I asked, while sipping my tea. I hate tea, but it's warm, and I'm happy to be warm again.
Don't you get it yet? This is your train. You're not supposed to leave it.
What do you mean?
Haven't you noticed no matter what conditions this train was going through, you have always been all right?
He said, staring straight through me. Well, yeah, passengers on trains are supposed to be all right. That's like the first thing you'd expect. That would be the most normal thing about this train, I said back, admittedly a little snarky. The conductor sighed and looked out the window.
What you get out of this ride is entirely up to you. You may have noticed this isn't your average train ride, but it isn't random. There is meaning to all of this. You just have to find it,
the conductor said, still looking out the window as he spoke. Now it was my turn to sigh. This was making my head hurt. I just wanted to go on a little adventure and leave my old life behind me. This was all a little more than I could handle. I joined the conductor in looking out the window. He noticed me doing so and with a curious expression asked,
"What do you see?"
I respond and say, "Nothing but snow, same as before." He shook his head and said,
"Look closer."
I turned back to the window and squinted my eyes. All I could see was the familiar white. Wait. It's all white. I don't even make out snow anymore, or the wind blowing the snow around. It was just pure plain white. It's just white? I look back to the conductor as I respond. He leans back thoughtfully in his chair.
Is it?
I look back again. Yeah, I don't see anything else.
Now you're getting it.
It's crazy to think about the windows of this train. One thin sheet of glass has been my window into other dimensions, and now it is showing me nothing. I looked through the glass and found myself confused. It's just white.
It is the absence of anything,
the conductor continues. Is that including darkness? I ask.
That would imply that something like light exists here, in this plane. What you're seeing is difficult to comprehend. There might actually be somewhere that we cannot see because we simply can't.
Right, but there are train tracks here, I say under my breath. The conductor looked at me with a very serious expression.
Son, by now you know this isn't an ordinary train.
Wondering about the logistics of train tracks is just foolish.
You'll make your head explode.
Huh. Reassuring. So what do we do now?
The same thing we've done all along. Be a passenger and ride along.
Right. Okay. Simple enough, I suppose. I'm not sure how much time has passed. Have full days gone by? I don't know. It all blurs together. It's difficult to tell when your environment outside isn't changing. I kept looking out the window, expecting a different result. No day, no night, no wind in the trees to watch, no fields passing by, no nothing passing by. At first I was relieved to have some peace. Then I was bored. Bored out of my mind. I desperately reached into my brain for something to think about, but as time passed it became harder and harder. Harder to remember my upbringing, past experiences, memories of work, people, places. It all felt like a haze. I'm not sure if it's because I had been relying on my brain for too much heavy lifting here while I was bored, or if this place was doing something to me. I felt like I was losing too much. It honestly felt like I was doing all I could to just keep my sense of self together. Is this what it's like to be in those experiments where you're locked into a white room with no stimulation for days at a time? At least in those experiments that I've seen, the contestants were being paid. Not that they cared much about the money by the end, they just wanted out. Which is something that I am relating to very strongly right now. What was boredom turned to frustration? How long was I expected to deal with all of this nothingness? I knocked on the chair with my knuckles to create some sense of sound. The conductor was fast asleep, so he wasn't providing any stimulation for me. Bastard could have at least had the courtesy to snore, so I could hear something. It irritated me that I couldn't hear the train anymore. No mechanics turning and churning. No chugging of the engine or grinding of the rails beneath us. I tried to remember what it sounded like. Did it ever make noise? That is what I missed the most. I had long abandoned hoping to see anything out the window. I fixated inside the cabin, an environment that at least made sense to me, that I could control to some degree. I found myself changing positions constantly. Standing, sitting, pacing, running back and forth. Screaming, yelling, crying, sobbing. I swear I was trying to do everything I could to feel. I rebelled against the silence. I punched the walls and banged on the windows. The nothing. I hate the nothing. It teases me by providing me with only absence. I miss something. I hate the conductor. How could he sleep through all of my commotion? How could he leave me alone to my misery like this? I slumped to the floor, weeping silently. I gently hit my fists against the floor. I used up all my energy. All I had in me was pathetic little thuds against the wooden ground. Why did this bother me so much? Did being left to my own self really destroy me like this? I exhaled a long, exasperated breath and lay down on my back. I give up. I submit to whatever this is. I don't even remember where we were before this. Was this all there ever was? That's fine. I accept it. I am nothing compared to whatever force controls this. What was this thing I was in? Is it moving? Am I in a box that floats in emptiness eternally? Well, that's fine with me. I am nothing. I am in nothing. We are nothing. Just then, a wave of sensation flooded over me. Memories rushed back into my head. Feeling rushed back into my body. I felt like I was entering Lightspeed in Star Wars. Hey, I remember pop culture. Emotion washed over me. I felt like crying and laughing at the same time. It was a concoction of joy and relief. I looked around the room like it was my first time seeing it, seeing color and design. The wood carvings in the wall, the patterns in the seats, the warm hum and soft glow of the lights. It was all beautiful. That's when I noticed the conductor stirring in his seat. With a loud yawn, he stretched his arms out and muttered, "It's about time." Whoa, what do you mean? I stared in disbelief. It felt like it had been ages since I interacted with another human being.
You let go.
Just like that, the white vanished, swallowed into an infinite darkness. The environment did a total 180, from the impossible blankness of white to a void of the darkest darkness. The train lights struggled to compete with the stark blackness that was all around us. The interior train lights struggled to compete with the stark blackness that was all around us. Now what? We're going from white to black? I already let go. What am I supposed to do here? Hold on?
Just wait a minute. Look,
The conductor said patiently. I looked outside the window, and he was right. There was more to see than darkness. Tiny white lights sparkled all around us. Those looked like
stars. Yep. Gorgeous, aren't they?
he said, staring out the window. He wasn't wrong. It was a beautiful sight to see. There was a sudden shift in the train, or should I say, underneath the train, as I stopped feeling the vibration of tracks beneath us. I got up and rushed to the train car door. Is it safe to open?
One way to find out.
I grabbed hold of the door handle and slid the door open. Everything seemed fine. I stepped a little further outside the cabin and looked down. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The railroad was gone. I looked around behind the train and noticed the tracks that used to guide us were slowly falling and drifting apart. They appeared to be floating off, deep into the void that surrounded us. Trying not to freak out, I calmly walked backwards into the train and closed the door. I returned to my seat and sat down. Staring straight ahead of me, I say, "There's no track." The conductor says nothing, continuing to stare out the window. Now I realize how dumb I am for saying that, or even being worried about it. Nothing has made sense so far. Why would it now? He even told me to stop asking about the tracks. I turned my gaze back out the window. Beautiful cosmetic patterns, scattered as far as the eye can see. Giant rocks floated all around the cabin as we slowly drifted through space. I assume we're in space. I laughed to myself. Why wouldn't we be in space? I felt myself calm down as I took in the beauty. Is it terrifying to be floating seemingly endlessly through space? Yes, definitely. But there's something amazing to it too. How else would I ever get to experience something like this? At least it wasn't infinite nothingness or blackness. There was depth to it, a beauty to it, a collage of purple, red, blue, and white, all managing to come together to create something that brings meaning to the nothingness around and between it. I found myself wondering, was there meaning to this? Was this outer space like the one that I was familiar with? Did these gatherings of celestial bodies make up galaxies? Were there people living out there? Was I even in the same universe? Space always made me think like this. Whenever it was nighttime and I looked up and saw that dark canvas filled with twinkling stars, I found myself wondering, asking myself the big questions. Asking myself just how small was I in contrast to the universe? Did it matter that I was here? Alive and breathing? All of my experiences and relationships, do they even matter?
Well, do they?
I was shaken out of my trance by words that seemed to answer the question I had just asked myself in my mind. How did you... I stopped answering when I saw the conductor raise an eyebrow. I guess they do?
You guess?
Well, of course they matter. They're all important in their own way.
How so?
I paused for a moment to think. Because all of those experiences make me who I am. I couldn't be who I am without them.
And why does that matter?
Because it matters to me. I paused. That's why. There was a silence in the cabin. The realization of what I had just admitted hit me, well, like a train. My life is important because it's mine. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, or the impact that I have on the universe. I can be impacted by others. I can be impacted by things. But the choices I make are mine and mine alone. Does it matter on a cosmic scale, the choices I make? Maybe not. But who cares? Good or bad, they are my choices. And they matter because I matter. Whew. I let my brain exhale as I relaxed into the chair. I didn't expect to go on an existential journey today, but riding on a train through space will do that to you. Out the window, I noticed something. The collages of colors and patterns were starting to move, to come together. I looked on in awe as the cosmic shapes began to form something larger. It looked like the upper torso of a person. Then I saw the most unexpected thing. Another train. I couldn't believe it. It was far away, but close enough that I was able to see the individual cabins and the shape of the vehicle. It was moving, but in a different direction, towards the giant being. The colossal space figure reached its arm out towards the train. Before I could comprehend what was happening, the train was swallowed up into the being's palm. It's like the train was driving straight into it. It didn't appear to try to move or turn out of the way. Just straight in it went. Like that was the predetermined course it was on. No explosion or derailment. It went right on into the hand that must have been made up of hundreds of galaxies at least, all varying in shapes and sizes and colors. Once the train was completely enveloped and disappeared, I'm not gonna lie, I began to worry. I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread looming in my soul. I don't know what happened to that train, but the chances are pretty high it was about to happen to this one. I don't know whether or not that is a good thing, but I had a feeling that I was going to find out. Then it looked at me. The last thing I remember, I was in a train floating through space, staring straight into the cosmic face of some godlike being when I woke up. Still, yes, in the train, but no longer in space. It actually looked somewhat normal outside. We were back on tracks again. A strange comfort. Around us were green hills and grassy plains, trees and fields of wheat and flowers scattered across the horizon. But unlike the happy-looking environment on the surface, the sky was gray, cloudy, and angry. The wind was heavy. It blew against the train and tested its integrity. This felt similar from when I got on the train. In the distance, a familiar object formed in the sky. A funnel. Another tornado was forming in a field up ahead, and it looked as though we were driving right by it. What I saw next made me do something I didn't think I'd have the courage to do since we were in that Arctic environment. Leave the train. Red lightning coursed through the tornado, the same way it did earlier when I boarded this tribular train. All my troubles, all the chaos and trials I went through started when we drove into that electric tornado in the first place. Now we were headed by it again, but this time not into it. I couldn't help but wonder that if I ever wanted to return to my reality, a place that I understood and knew, I would have to exit the way I entered. And staying on this train wasn't it. As much as it felt counterintuitive to leave the train, especially when things seemed to be going back to normal, my gut told me I had to. I had to take a chance. I'd learned a lot about myself since boarding, and I knew it was time for me to commit to fate. This wasn't a coincidence. It was there for a reason, and it was meant for me. I got it from my chair, walked up to the door, and confidently grabbed the handle. I looked over at the conductor, who did nothing but give me a little nod. I nodded back and flung open the door. I was running. The wind blew my hair and clothing all around in a chaotic fashion as I did the craziest thing I had ever done. Ran towards, not away, from a full-blown tornado. Jumping off a moving train went surprisingly easy, as I had done exactly what I'd always seen in movies. Tuck and roll when I hit the ground. I was a little scuffed up from the whole interaction, but I was feeling good, motivated, ready to get back and take my life back into my own hands. The wind howled as I ran. I had trouble running in a straight line and keeping myself upright. I felt at any moment that I could get tossed aside. I stumbled quite a few times, but I stayed on track, stayed focused. I didn't know what was going to happen when I got there, but in my mind it was the only choice. The first of many purpose-filled decisions I'd make, I'm sure. Trees and other vegetation around me was uprooted and thrown around the closer I got to the swirling behemoth. I began needing to duck and dodge branches that flew through the air and watch my footing more closely as new objects kept landing in front of me constantly. It was only a matter of time now. Seconds. Moments before I would be lifted from my feet and forced into whatever came next. I was ready.